Snipers feel inevitable now, but in autumn 1914 they weren't doctrine, they were a problem. On the new trench lines of the Western Front, British and French troops learned fast that a raised head meant a death notice. Unseen German riflemen were lifting men out of parapets with single shots, and the Allied answer had to be more than bravado. The war was inventing itself: gas clouds, aircraft, armoured cars, creeping barrages. Yet the trench deadlock bred another innovation. Armies needed eyes and a trigger finger that could work from cover, dominate no man's land, and do it without wasting ammunition or men. That pressure cooked the modern sniper into being. From September and October 1914, everyone hit the same wall. How do you watch and kill an enemy you can barely see? Big set-piece attacks were occasional, daily attrition wasn't. The only way to survive the hours between assaults was precise fire from protected loopholes, shell holes, and cellar windows, work for patient specialists, not volley shooters. Early on it was improvised and private. Good shots, borrowing hunting scopes, cutting slots in sandbags, learning the light. By mid-war, it was institutional. Sniping schools, range cards, dummy heads on sticks, periscopes, steel plates with thumb-width ports, and a discipline of fieldcraft that outlived the trenches. But the sources are patchy, especially beyond the British record, and even in reliable diaries, sniper often blurs into good rifleman, Scharfschütze, or tireur d'élite. What we do know is simple. The Central Powers began with the edge. Germany and Austria-Hungary had Jäger and Schützen traditions, a hunting culture that respected stillness and range estimation and the finest optics on earth. When front units asked for magnified sights to pick out a cap badge at 300 yards, Zeiss and friends could deliver faster than Britain or France could organize a doctrine. A private account from the first winter makes the point. A British section waits for rations. A man leans up to wave the runner, and the parapet spits dust where his temple had been an instant ago. No report heard, only the flat thud downrange. They answer with a dozen rifles and hit nothing. Later they lift a periscope and find the tell, a dark knot in a shattered tree that isn't bark at all, just a round hole cut in a plate, watching, waiting. When the first winter of the war set in, the German army already had an ace up its sleeve. The Duke of Ratibor, a man with deep hunting roots and influence, launched a public campaign to collect civilian hunting rifles with telescopic sights for the front. Within months, between 5,000 and 10,000 rifles had been sent east and west, and soon the best shots, foresters, gamekeepers, professional hunters, were stalking no man's land like it was the Black Forest. The effect was immediate and brutal. Suddenly, British and French trenches became killing zones. Men started falling from ladders or duckboards without warning. Just a flat crack in the distance and a lifeless body slumping down. At first, officers dismissed it as stray bullets or chance fire. But it wasn't chance. It was method. The Germans were studying their prey. Some units even hung kites or English-language signs over their lines, taunting the curious Allied soldiers to look up, and when they did, they died. Others built armoured plates with tiny loopholes, narrow enough for a single muzzle to see through, but strong enough to stop a .303 round. British infantrymen, desperate to punch through, dragged old elephant guns to the trenches in the hope that their massive bullets could pierce the plates. It rarely worked. Among these early hunters was Gefreiter Georg Herrenreiter, once a poacher in peacetime Bavaria. In October 1914, he volunteered to climb a tree overlooking the French line. From that perch, he picked off any movement that dared surface, officers, observers, runners, and radioed back artillery corrections. 2 of his rifles were shot apart in his hands before he went down wounded, but he refused to climb down. By the time he was killed in 1916, he had over 100 confirmed kills, earning the Bavarian Golden Bravery Medal. His legend spread across the German ranks, the woodsman turned ghost of the trenches. Nobody knew exactly how much damage these early snipers caused, but British battalions constantly complained of the unseen death. Reports claimed 10 to 18 men lost per day to German marksmen. Whether all were true sniping kills or not, it didn't matter. The fear worked. Troops refused to show their heads, even to pass orders or eat. It was psychological warfare at its purest form. The Germans were believed to field roughly one sniper for every 750 meters of front, a deadly web of eyes and rifles that the Allies had no real answer for. Their own scoped rifles were so scarce that units had to pass them to the next relief battalion like prized heirlooms. Meanwhile, the art of sniping spread far beyond France and Flanders. In the Alps, where the mountains turned combat into hunting, the Austro-Hungarians had a natural edge. Their trenches overlooked Italian lines, and their access to optics was far superior. The Italians scrambled to catch up. Workshops in Milan and Turin began copying German designs, and training manuals ordered observers to retrieve a sniper's rifle if he was killed, so the precious scope wasn't lost. By 1916, Italian marksmen were taking their own toll. One recalled in haunting detail, "I had him well in my sights, the boy's pale face, wide eyes, blonde hair. I felt my temple throbbing against the butt. I fired. He arched back, arms to the sky, and folded among the rocks in spasms." A moment of mechanical duty, followed by silence. The new intimacy of industrial killing. Even the distant Gallipoli Peninsula became a sniper's paradise. The Ottomans lacked telescopic rifles, but from the ridgelines above the beaches, their sharpshooters looked straight down into Allied trenches, cutting down anyone who moved. It was here that Australian sniper Billy, the assassin, Singh, earned his name, credited with up to 300 kills and dueling a mysterious Turkish marksman known as Abdullah the Terrible. Some called it the first true sniper duel of the modern age, a manhunt across a sea of sandbags and silence. On the Eastern Front, it was the same story. The Russians had good riflemen, but few optics. German snipers had the advantage, and men like Wilhelm Enz described it coldly. "I would lie there half an hour with the scope ready until some Siberian came into view. I'd pull the trigger as if on a roebuck. The thought that he's a man, that he has a wife and child, always comes too late." The rifles had changed, but the moral distance had not. By late 1914, the German army formally institutionalized what had started as improvisation, ordering 15,000 scoped Mauser-Gewehr 98 rifles, assigning designated Scharfschützen in every regiment, and drafting manuals that outlined camouflage, range finding, and the use of observation pairs. Sniping had matured from a private habit into a profession, a cold, deliberate science of patience, precision, and silence. It was no longer hunting, it was the mechanized art of watching a man die before he even knew you were there. By spring 1915, the ad hoc hunting parties had hardened into purpose. Small, secretive Abschuss-Kommando, literally kill squads, began to appear where the front thinned, teams assembled not by accident but by design. There are even reports of units dangling crude bounties for confirmed kills, a cheap way to buy aggression and one that split opinion in the ranks. Some commanders called it necessary discipline, others called it a stain on the army's honor. The improvisation turned institutional almost overnight. German manuals and training circulars from 1915 refer to telescopic sight observer instruction and formal shooter schools. The Allies were slower, but not absent. Credit for forcing the British to move faster often goes to one man, Vernon Hesketh Pritchard, the indefatigable officer and marksman who prowled the corridors of Army HQ and argued, loudly and bitterly, that sniping was no accident. It was craft, and it deserved training. His work, and the pressure of bloody stalemate, led to the first British school of sniping in July 1916. The training itself was surgical. The scouting and patrolling manual, the doctrinal backbone that would remain in service for decades, distilled sniping into 4 aims: inflict casualties, gather intelligence, bolster friendly morale, and sap enemy courage. The Canadians pushed a hair further. Their courses bluntly set out to shake enemy morale, cause casualties, stop the enemy from working, and retaliate against enemy snipers. That clinical phrasing tells you everything. Sniping was as much about the mind as about the trigger. Classroom hours were spare. Most instruction was fieldcraft, judging range by the size of a helmet, reading wind from a torn bit of paper, correcting for bullet drop, and understanding how wooden stocks, damp weather, or a stiff sight could throw a man off when a single shot counted. Instructors drilled shooters not only to hit, but to observe, to watch the ripple of movement in an enemy trench, to call coordinates that would let artillery do the rest. They learned when to shoot. Dawn and dusk and moonlit nights were prime times, when light-softened edges and telescopic sights behaved predictably. Care of the rifle was obsessive. A scoped rifle was a precious instrument, the optical glass not to be fouled by powder, not to be loosened by a careless thumb. Manuals warned, do not tamper with the sight. Leave adjustments to armourers. A sniped man's kit often included a cleaning rod, spare mountings, and a trained observer who would recover the rifle if its owner fell. A practice specifically noted in Italian manuals, where an observer was ordered to bring the weapon back if the sniper was wounded. Camouflage, too, evolved into an art. The French, with their ateliers and artists, led the work on deception. Workshops manufactured decoys, fake carcasses, dummy heads, collapsed carts, anything to draw fire or hide a man. They supplied material and ideas to British schools and to the Royal Engineers Special Works Park, which then mass-produced lightweight hides and deceptive netting. From the heather of Scotland came the Lovat Scouts, stag stalkers and gamekeepers drafted into service, who stitched the first ghillie suits from burlap heather and burlap's messy cousins. Those suits were a revolution. Men became ruins, stones, or tufts of grass. In the visual geometry of the front, a man in a ghillie suit was not a man at all. Weapons and ammo were pushed forward as well. Germany experimented with armor-piercing bullets in 1915 that could, at least for a time, defeat the tiny loophole plates Allied snipers used. In response, the British tried heavy shot, even the ludicrous elephant guns, to punch through steel. The exchange was mechanical escalation, plate against projectile, concealment against countermeasures. Organisation mirrored effectiveness. In theory, British battalions might have an 8-man sniper contingent. In practice, numbers varied wildly with need and supply. Teams were small, mobile, and ruthlessly selective. Usually, a shooter worked with an observer, one man to see, one to shoot, a pair that could cover a defined arc of the front and move quietly along it. Their reward for surviving the mortuary rhythm of no man's land was also practical. Sniper detachments were often spared the most grinding trench chores, and later in the war they were typically withheld from mass infantry assaults. Not everyone saw that as a blessing. Some envied the perceived safety, but for a man who preferred calculation to chaos, it was a coveted duty. The human side of the trade is blunt and revealing. Ion Idris, the Australian who fought in Palestine, explained why counter-sniping loomed so large in training. The respect you gain for a Turkish sniper when a bullet smacks within half an inch of your jaw is thrilling. That single line tells the truth. Sniping taught respect for silence, and a small wound could change a man's entire horizon. For German soldiers, the change of role could feel like promotion. Ignaz Hautum, given a post as a marksman, wrote with a mixture of pride and relief, "I have been assigned a wonderful job. I am now a sniper. Whenever I feel like it, I walk to the observing post. When I spot an Englishman who is bold enough to raise his nose, it is my duty and obligation to shoot him. Duty, routine, and the morality of distance." That sentence captures the transformation from conscript to technician of death. Training, tools, and tactics congealed into a new profession. Sniping was no longer a handful of men with hunting rifles. It had schools, doctrines, inspectors, and manuals. And once a state invests in doctrine, the practice spreads. Sniping units proliferated, optics factories hummed, camouflage ateliers multiplied, and an entire arm of the infantry learned to be patient, invisible, and precise. The front lines were changing. A new kind of soldier had arrived to measure life and death by inches of glass and the steady breath between shots. By late 1915, the sniper had become a fixture of trench life. The novelty was gone. Now every front had its chosen watchers, each lying in wait for a face, a hand, a reflection of sunlight off a scope. For men like Ignaz Hautum, life as a sniper felt almost privileged. "I do not need to do any sentry duty," he wrote home, "and I am allowed to sleep at night while everyone else is on their feet. I feel like I am in heaven." His heaven, of course, was built on the quiet business of killing. Once both sides began training specialists, the trenches turned into an invisible battlefield of eyes and triggers. The static lines didn't mean the war had gone still. Far from it. Every day and night saw trench raids, artillery registration, and endless harassment fire. Scouts crept through no man's land at dusk. Working parties built wire entanglements under moonlight. And all of them knew that one careless movement could end in a single whisper of lead from a hidden muzzle. That was the rhythm of trench warfare, and in that rhythm the sniper ruled. Most shots were taken between 1 and 400 meters, but the distance was less important than the angle. Each side refined tactics to match their terrain. Teams usually worked in pairs, one observer, one shooter. The observer watched through the scope, logging wind shifts, light changes, or enemy movement, while the shooter conserved strength and stayed ready. The Germans sometimes doubled this formation, fielding two pairs that supported each other, one drawing attention, the other waiting for the counter-sniper's flash to answer with a kill. Soon, every major army adopted the periscope rifle, a crude but effective contraption of mirrors and wood that let a man shoot without exposing his skull above the parapet. If an enemy marksman caused too many casualties, battalion snipers would be called up to hunt him down. The cat-and-mouse duels began. Hours of silence broken by a single shot, sometimes at a dummy helmet, sometimes at a real head. The hierarchy of targets was coldly logical. Enemy snipers first, then officers, artillery observers, machine gunners, and sappers. A sniper's mission was never to kill indiscriminately. It was to cripple the enemy's command and observation. Sometimes shooting at a machine gun's cooling drum achieved more than shooting the man behind it. The Germans countered with water jacket armor plates and even issued special helmet shields for their gunners. None of it offered comfort. To the average trench soldier, snipers were both savior and curse. Relief spread through the ranks when their own sharpshooter arrived to silence a persistent German marksman. Yet resentment followed close behind. The sniper would take his shot, slip away to his hidden post, and the retaliation would fall on the infantry who stayed behind. One British soldier put it plainly, "I never liked them. They'd shoot some poor Hun and bugger off, then we'd get it in the neck. Our officer used to chase them out, telling them to ply their murderous bloody trade somewhere else." There was no camaraderie between the line troops and the hidden hunter. They fought two entirely different wars. Snipers also had another role, the unseen line of defense against assaults. When enemy infantry went over the top, the snipers waited behind their own parapets or in craters just behind the front, methodically cutting down officers. The Germans described French snipers at Verdun as phantoms. "When we attacked," one wrote, "we could not find them. It was like fighting ghosts." German sharpshooters used the same tactic in reverse, occupying shell craters behind their advance to pick off French leaders and halt counterattacks before they began. It was murder by design, organized, deliberate, and devoid of passion. By 1917, the balance began to shift. Though German optics remained superior, the Allies had finally caught up in training and numbers. A German report from mid-1917 admitted, somewhat grudgingly, that the English had become the best precision shooters among their enemies. The number and quality of scoped marksmen on the English side have strongly increased during the previous months. The English come before the French. Much of that improvement came from the Dominion troops, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, men who'd grown up outdoors, hunting or trapping long before they wore a uniform. The battlefield became just another kind of wilderness. In the Allied ranks, some sniper units reached almost mythic status. Bailey's South African sharpshooters, a privately raised outfit of just 24 men, claimed a combined total of 3,000 kills, an impossible number to verify, but telling of the unit's reputation. Among Canadians, the contribution of indigenous soldiers stood out. Henry Louis Norwest, a Métis rodeo performer before the war, recorded 115 confirmed kills before being shot himself. Francis Pegamagabo, an Ojibwe soldier, became the most lethal sniper of the entire conflict. 378 confirmed kills, a record untouched until modern times. Their skill did not go unnoticed by their enemies. German sniper Manfred Gossen recalled his unit facing the Canadians. "We had the Canadians in front of us. They were the very devil." It was grudging respect, the kind only earned on the long edge of a scope. By now, the sniper's war had reached full maturity, an underground duel of patience, deception, and nerves stretched to the limit. A shot fired at dawn might be avenged at dusk, sometimes by a man the victim had never even seen. Each side had learned that on a battlefield ruled by artillery, poison gas, and machine guns, the smallest weapon of all, a single rifle with a scope, could still decide who lived long enough to see morning. By late 1917, even veteran snipers began to feel the limits of their trade. "Our snipers could not shoot without retribution," one British marksman recalled. "We lost many good men. Even for us old trench veterans, it was too dangerous. Every shot risked exposure, and the men who once hunted in silence now became targets themselves." British success didn't mean the Germans had vanished. Their sharpshooters still haunted no man's land, patient and merciless. One of their victims was a young British lieutenant, Bernard Montgomery, later to become one of the most famous generals of the next war. "A soldier ran to me and began to put a field dressing on my wound," he wrote. "He was shot through the head by a sniper and collapsed on top of me. The sniper continued to fire. The dead man received many bullets intended for me." It was a brutal reminder that even in the last years of the Great War, death in the trenches could come quietly and without warning. By this stage, the balance of power had shifted. The British Empire, backed by its Dominion troops, had eclipsed the Germans in the sniper's duel. But as the war itself transformed in 1918, so too did the role of the sniper. The trenches gave way to movement once more. The static front became a landscape of retreat, pursuit, and broken defense lines. The sniper, once master of stillness, now had to move. In that final year, a new force entered the war, the United States Army. They brought with them the same hunting instinct that had made the Canadians and Australians so dangerous. At first, America had no official sniper corps, no formal training, only the Springfield rifle, and the raw fieldcraft of men raised in the woods. Commanders like Colonel F. Wise built sniper teams from scratch, teaching men to adapt in the chaos of open battle. Some names became legend. Herman Davis was credited with killing 4 Germans at a staggering 1,000 yards, a shot few believed possible at the time, and Sergeant Alvin York, armed only with a British Lee Enfield and its iron sights, killed 25 Germans and captured 132 more. His feat earned him the Medal of Honor and a place in American folklore. As the front lines broke open, snipers evolved again. They were no longer isolated hunters, but assault scouts, advancing beside infantry to neutralize machine guns, enemy marksmen, and observation posts. British platoon manuals, by 1918, even prescribed that 2 trained snipers accompany every leading section, doubling as forward scouts and spotters. The French perfected their own deadly rhythm, artillery and gas to suppress, then snipers to pick off defenders through the firing slits of bunkers and pillboxes, clearing the way for bombing teams armed with grenades. On the German side, soldiers began to describe a new and frightening precision from across no man's land. "We had great trouble from the American riflemen," one German survivor wrote. 3 of our top 4 machine gunners were shot down one after another, and no one dared to take their place. With no fire support, we were soon overrun and forced to surrender. The Americans were new to Europe's war, but they learned fast. Still, the Germans didn't give up their art. As they fell back, they used sniper and machine gun pairs to delay the Allied advance, fighting not for victory, but for time. A Canadian regiment at Le Quesnel recorded one such fight. 1 Boche sniper did more damage than 4 machine guns firing from the same position. The guns were located, the sniper was not. It was the perfect summary of sniping's power and mystery. invisible, psychological, disproportionate. By the war's final months, snipers had become both feared and mythologized, ghosts who ruled the space between trenches, whose single bullet could paralyze a company or silence a commander's orders forever. Their exact toll will never be known. Official estimates are vague, and claims of tens of thousands killed may be optimistic, but there's no doubt that snipers changed the rhythm of trench warfare. They turned every parapet, every crater, every blade of grass into potential death. For ordinary infantrymen, the presence of a sniper added an invisible pressure. The constant knowledge that movement meant exposure, and exposure meant death. Men learned to crawl instead of walk, to whisper instead of speak, to live in the shadow of unseen eyes. And for the snipers themselves, the toll did not end with the armistice. Many carried it home, one veteran later confessed. For years after the war, I used to wake in the early hours and go walking, to forget some of the things I'd seen and done. He spoke for all of them, the hunters who became haunted, who spent the rest of their lives trying to unsee the men who never saw them. The Great War had birthed a new kind of soldier, patient, surgical, and solitary, a man who fought without glory, in silence and shadow. And when the world went to war again, 20 years later, his lessons, his optics, his fieldcraft, his cold precision, would return. The modern sniper was no longer an experiment. He was here to stay,